Namaskar. It's very nice to be back here in India once again. I took the liberty of, I think you can point with this thing, of slightly altering from urbanization to humanization, because I realized in talking to people here that the conference really isn't just only about technology and design, but really is about the human component that plays sort of a central part to the work that we all do. So, as was mentioned, a lot of the work that I've been involved in centers around how technology meets design and how that's been deployed in particular fields of work, notably transportation and aviation. My background is I'm an architect. I'm also a computer scientist by training. Have spent time doing bits of teaching, but over the last 15, almost 20 years now, I've been primarily focused on practice, and dealing in the depths of practice really means that you dive into many, many other aspects of the design work that are sometimes quite technical or sometimes quite demanding, but you're still trying to keep the ethos of the design that you're doing. Let's see. One of my particular interests is how we can learn from other fields of technology, other industries. Working in the aviation sector, obviously the aerospace industry is something that is quite dear to me and quite interesting to me, and also the fact that none of these companies are perfect. They've all had their struggles. Boeing, for example, is a good one. When they built the 747, what you see the very first one being built on the left, what you can see on the corner is that they're still finishing the factory they're going to build the plane in, and they needed to sell the first plane to be able to actually pay for the rest of the stuff, so they were still living in tents. So sometimes technological leaps require a leap of faith in the terms that you work, in the terms of projects you're willing to take on, and in the way, in case you want to use technologies to make the work better. From documenting things digitally to, sorry about the resolution here, to actually not only decentralizing a production process, but even decentralizing design in the case of the Dreamliner that many of us have flown on to come over here. So I won't go too much into detail into this. Suffice to say that there are lessons to be learned between the fields of other industries and other practices and how we can apply those to design. If we look at the correlation, if you like, between the evolution of certain aerospace projects, the reduction of complexity, the reduction of fabrication challenges, and the reduction of risk through an increase of management between different models of aircraft, that has been possible through a process and a management, if you like, deployment that has enabled people to make projects much more achievable with a higher degree of realism. Something similar has happened in the field of architecture, where we have also been working on projects that have gone from, if you think of Saarinen's early work, all hand-drawn, people doing curvy buildings already 40, 50, 60 years ago, to what we can do today, very much in terms of decentralizing design, controlling it through parametric technology and other tools that allow us to forecast the performance of a building, the cost of assembling it, and the risk involved therein. And therefore, when you work with clients, you have a much better control over the project that you're going to do. So the history of this, again, comes from the notion of early research. In this case, you see I still had like black hair then, was the idea of haptic robots that could be used as programming tools. So these were each intelligent cubes that had microprocessor in them, and you could visually or physically program something. By stacking them together, they would generate computer code, in this case controlling robots to write Chinese characters. So the way that, again, you start seeing the human interaction between something very technical, very complex, to a very physical act of assembling things, much the way that, say, my children are doing in Lego. To take those notions and apply them then on real projects on a large scale, to be able to use rule-based design systems and other technologies that have a similar predictive capability to design and construct projects that are potentially too complex or would take too long to achieve in the amount of time available. So at the same time, because there is this human component, and it was really interesting to see Emma's talk and to see Tim Kube before, what they were talking about is the sensorial and, if you will, the human interactive aspect. And this is something that remains very close to the work we do today, and I'll show that to you in one of the projects we've done. There's a really great quote that I love by Maya Angelou, who's a poet who died not long ago, who basically said, people will forget what they were told to do, but they will always remember how you made them feel. And it's this idea of feeling, this idea of the personal significance of any project for any one person is what gives that project significance. And this is something that in all our technological wisdom we should always be aware of. So this, I'll just show you quickly two projects that hopefully will characterize this. What I wanted to do in this talk, on one hand, is talk about obviously the human aspect of what these projects can do for a community, what they can do for the members of the public, but also what is the human requirement to achieve these projects? What is the human interaction in the design process? I know that most of you here are practicing designers and or involved in design research or education, and I think that's an equally important aspect. Beyond the end product is also what is the process that takes us to achieve our work. So Galaxy Soho was one of the first projects that I built in Beijing, 330,000 square meters of mixed use offices and retail right in the center core on the Second Ring Road. And one of the ambitions of the client early on was to create a human space that would take people away from the car-dominated condition of Beijing back into the kind of notion of courtyard piazzas and sort of a human landscape, human scale urban condition that people could appreciate. And at the same time, they wanted to do that in an incredibly fast amount of time. This was the first of 4 projects that we've done with Soho China. We're just finishing the 4th one in Beijing. And so we've built around 1.2 million square meters in China with Soho alone. So there's been a lot of work. And as you can see, it's all about acceleration. It's about acceleration of time. It's about acceleration of process, reduction of risk, and achieving a documentation that a contractor can build very quickly at a given cost and yet still maintain the level of quality and human experience that you see here is the ambition in the rendering on the left. So of course there are mundane things. Everybody knows what BIM is. I don't need to go into the idea of digital documentation. This was one of the first fully BIM implemented projects that we did and that were done in China, right down to the last nut and bolt. But what you see here, the one I love is the image, what I think is a cultural bridge, because you have this colleague here, Rolando. He's from Mexico, and he's explaining to an audience of Chinese facade fabricators and contractors what it is that we're trying to do. And in fact, what we had was a highly detailed 3D model that we would build in terms of the design, and the contractors would come back with the shop drawings all fully fabricated in 3D, which at the time was quite innovative. But most important was the fact that you could use this medium as a way of bridging a cultural and language divide that was otherwise unbridgeable. So suddenly it became a universal language of collaboration and allowed us to basically explore the design, explore also the local condition of cost and of complexity. So this is if you're working around the world in different countries, as we tend to do, we have to understand the local construction industry, what it is capable of, and we can design and play to its strengths to then basically take a design and go through a series of optimizations, rationalizations that effectively look at what is available in China, what can I fabricate in China, what technologies are there, for example, even advanced things like variable geometry pin presses, but you still are dealing with very, very conventional types of fabrication and assembly techniques, as well as you may document them in a three-dimensional environment. It doesn't take away from the fact that in the end, you're relying on a workforce, which you see on this side, are the people that are going to have to put this together. And the people putting it together are skilled workers in this particular case, but what we have to guarantee on a project that is as challenging geometrically as this one, that everything snaps together perfectly on site and we get the quality that we originally envisioned. And to do that, we have to harmonize the design technology and understanding of geometry, of constructability, and of the maturity of the construction industry that we work in, to then snap everything together and get this kind of beautiful result. So basically you see a seamless facade, continuous bands, and also even though it's rationalized, you see these curvatures continuing, and you achieve that effect, the goal that you originally set out to achieve, which in this case is these people enjoying this interactive space with these wonderful reactive fountains that react to the crowd and so on, in a unified, harmonious, new urban location that takes, again, people back into a walking city. That was the goal of the project, is to achieve this vision. It's the process behind it that I think you as professionals are all aware, and it's good to remind ourselves of that. So when we talk about the human component, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the aviation sector, because over the last decade, I've been responsible for basically building a business within ZHA that deals with aviation. We, about 2 weeks ago, just a little over, less than 2 weeks ago, we opened the new airport in Beijing. I'll show you some of that. This is a project we're working on in Munich. We are also, as you may know, the lead consultant and prime architect for the new Navi Mumbai International Airport in Mumbai. I would love to show you that project. We have not launched it yet with Mr. Narendra Modi, so hopefully in the future I will come back and show you some of that again. It's been very exciting. We're quite far along in the process, and hopefully you'll get to see that soon. This one in Munich, again, was about an existing space, a very human space. People come and meet landside, that is between terminals. They have a space where they can aggregate, come together, and enjoy many different activities. This is an existing space that we were asked to reinterpret, to rethink, and recondition. And most importantly, it was about not just travelers, but people who, sorry about the quality of the slides here, people who work here, so employees, workers, travelers, staff, families who come there into this kind of micro-urban hub within Munich, reinterpreting, redesigning what their different interactions will be, and creating a new space, or revised space, that attracts everyone, not just the traveler itself. So it's that human dimension that we're always looking for, even in a place of travel. Another project that has just started construction is this one in Taiwan. It's the Danjiang Bridge. It's the world's longest asymmetrical cable stay bridge. This is a cable stay bridge. It means it has these long tension cables. Most of these bridges, as you know, will have 2 towers. This one only has 1, and it's asymmetrical. It's less expensive to build one. In a seismic environment such as Taiwan, quite difficult to do. Why is this project important? It's important because it closes the isthmus of the Tamsui River north of Taipei, and basically connects Bali and Danshui, which are 2 villages that if you had to get from one to the other, you have to drive around. It would take you over an hour. And this way, basically, you're going to cut out, I don't know how many millions of human hours of traffic by doing this, building a road and rail bridge across the isthmus of the Tamsui River. The interesting thing about this one, again, is how do you achieve something like this, and how does a dialogue as a designer with technicians and technical fabricators come to play? So the entire project is controlled in a computer system using, again, tools that come from the aerospace industry. In fact, we work, among other things, with a lot of the technologies that are used by the very same Boeings and Airbuses around the world. By controlling certain driving forms, we can achieve many different versions of this design and optimize it to what it needs to do. One of the things that becomes important then is the constructability, which is a big aspect of how do you achieve these projects. And in this case, we're talking about casting concrete in terms of a variable geometry form, in the sense that you can see on the top, the shape changes from being a concave to a convex shape. To do that, you cannot use repeatable slipform systems, which is what generates the economy of building a bridge or a tower or a core. It's normally just vertical. Here we have this kind of sensual form, this kind of flowing form that we wanted to maintain. And really, it's a dialogue with this gentleman right here, Mr. Brunner, at Perry, which is a very big, very well-known international, how can you say, concrete shuttering system company that they provide the formwork. And what he came up with, he's developing, is a variable geometry formwork system. And what that means is that through strand jacks that can be computer controlled, as you move up, the slip form changes shape. And that suddenly gives us the ability to move up at the same speed of casting, to maintain the speed on site that we need to control the cost of the contractor, but having that variability in the geometry. So in a way, there's an interaction between technological development and design ambition and design, if you like, goals that we may have, but it comes purely from the human dialogue of understanding how can we bring that kind of knowledge together upstream and preemptively into the design process. Now, this is just a sort of a sideshow, but I do want to show it to you because this has a lot to do with how we practice. Perhaps the only really weird slide on this presentation. But what it shows you is that we have our design team that won and is now building this project between ourselves and partners in Germany and Taiwan, working entirely in 3D. Our construction documents, instrument of contract, which is what you issue to your client, has to be 2D, but the client himself wants to basically work again in 3D with the contractor to achieve that level of quality and achieve that level of efficiency that otherwise would not be possible. And so what we've been discussing with them for a long time, and we're talking about the Ministry of Transport of Taiwan, so it takes a long time, is can you take that same 3D document, the way that Boeing does, that I showed you at the beginning, and give it authority so you actually qualify it into an instrument of contract and issue it directly to the contractor as a 3D document. Seems obvious. Boeing does it all the time. Why can't we as architects? The reason being is we have laws enshrined that describe what a construction document is. It's a Cartesian artifact, a piece of paper. And to getting away from that has been, over the years, one of the major side events, but underpinning this kind of work that have been necessary to achieve the kind of work that we're showing today. So the project in Beijing, I thought I'd show you this one because, of course, Navi is still in production. This is the original competition model, 6-pointed star. This is the final version that has been built. It's a new second airport, much like Navi. It's a second airport for Beijing. The first one will continue to exist, but is operating now at 105, 107% planned capacity, so cannot expand any further. So building a completely second airport was the choice. We were shortlisted in the competition and eventually selected, along with our French partners, to produce the final design, which you see here then in different phases of construction over the years. The project is one of the largest single-volume terminal buildings in the world. It's the main building itself of the terminal is 700,000 square meters. If you add the ground transportation, parking, and the integrated hotel, we're getting close to 1 million square meters of construction in a single building. It can process 45 million passengers. That's a big number. For those of you who work in the sector, we will get to 72 with a satellite, which is just being built to the north. 72 million passengers is more passengers the entire original planned processing capacity of Heathrow Airport in one building. That just gives you an idea of how large and complex these projects are becoming in a part of the world where that human exchange is becoming fundamental. So human dialogue, in a way, we have video conferencing, we have teleconferencing, phone calls, does not replace the pheromones, does not replace meeting face-to-face and wanting to travel for family, for personal business reasons. And so the infrastructure is highly required to do this. And it is a significant project for the nation. The image on the left is probably the most symbolic one. Those of you familiar with Beijing will know that Beijing is a series of concentric squares. You access it through a central axis that goes through a series of ceremonial gates, historical gates, including the famous Tiananmen that everybody knows from Tiananmen Square, right into the inner sanctum of the Forbidden City. So you're kind of going into the most sacred heart of China along this axis. And coincidentally, our new airport sits right on that axis. And so we said, well, this is in a way a new gateway to Beijing. It's a new gateway to China. There's something very, very symbolic for the government in this. The main man himself, this is the president, came to the job site just to underscore how important this project is. It's actually one of the three so-called capital projects of China. One is the Three Gorges Dam, which you probably know is a very large dam system in China. The second is collectively the entire high-speed rail network of China, which is currently at about 17,000 kilometers of length. And the third one is the new Beijing-Daxing Airport and the surrounding economic zone. So very critical project for the government. Again, running through a fairly long bidding and design stage, mainly due to the fact that there was a change in administrations. We went from the Hu Jintao to the Xi Jinping administration, having a lot of interactions with them. And then once we got into the detailed design and construction, it was really go, 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 go. We've been engaged over the years on 4 different lots within the original design, the combined joint design team, executive design, then also all the retail, which I'll talk about, and also then doing construction supervision and ongoing design guardianship to maintain that kind of level of quality and interaction. The thing I think is important to note is that today most of these projects are truly multimodal projects. That means they're not just an airport, they're not just a station, they're actually everything rolled into one. So from the beginning, Daxing is built as an air terminal on top of a railway station the size of Paddington in London, with a very large bus station and a whole new highway system, fully interconnecting it into the regional fabric of Beijing, of all the way to Tianjin and Hebei province. So it is a nexus, it's a reticulum that helps innervate and connect China on many different levels. It's also worthwhile to note, again, the human effort required to this one. This is really old photograph, doing some very early designs in the competition stage, late at night in London, so we're talking 2011 here, right to working then with the client team and working with different groups, the Chinese executive design institutes that you have to work with as a foreigner, that we've been working with for many years in BIAT, for example. The previous Galaxy Soul project that I show you was also done with BIAT. So there's an existing relationship of collaboration with these partners that allows them to understand what you're trying to achieve and what they would like to do. And then working really with the Chinese client 24/7 over many, many months and several years between London, Paris, and Beijing to kind of achieve a goal, a unified goal of a unified kind of design vision. So just for those who used to travel a lot, I think you might find this interesting. What is it that makes this building particularly special? And one is that obviously we have what's called a fully dedicated service departure level, which is where you go and you have your check-in and you ask the check-in person, can I have an upgrade please, or a nice seat by the window, and check in your bag, and takes you to a departure level internationally. And then normally you will have also a domestic level where you can travel domestically and then you arrive, right? So normally you have departures and arrivals. What we have underneath that is a separate, again, international level. So we're stacking the building vertically with a railway station underneath that serves all the levels. But most importantly, what they've figured out in China, which is also happening in India, is the fact that people are becoming very comfortable with smart technology and mobile technology and the idea of self-processing. Tim this morning was talking about removing salespeople in car companies. Here we're removing processing people in the airport. So one of the things that was installed here, and this is the faith of the client to actually say we're going to literally build a separate floor of concrete, is a self-processing domestic departure level where people assume you're going to come in with a smartphone with your boarding pass on it, you're going to walk right through. If you have a bag, you can check it in one of those self-tagging systems. You have facial recognition systems within the building that basically allow you to take, this building acts as a giant server, takes out a token on your face, you walk straight through to departures, you never have to interact with a person at all. So that's very innovative in the sense of recognizing how technology has affected a population, how technology is now making people operate in a different, more independent way. It also recognizes by the government that in China, we've had over the last 15, 20, 30 even years since Deng Xiaoping opened China about 40 years ago, an emerging merchant class, an emerging entrepreneurial class of people who travel frequently between Beijing and Guangzhou and Shanghai on a weekly basis with their little carry-on to do their business. They want nothing more than a processing level like that where they can just walk through the airport and get to where they need to be. All of this interconnected with a space that gives everybody that same sense of pleasure and that same sense of belonging, in this case, to a centralized travel zone. So early on, we really wanted to make sure that all travelers enjoyed a central space, however you walk through, on different bridges, interwoven levels of transition, and at the same time, produce for the client a fully flexible building, because a building like this has a lifespan of about 50 to 70 years. The way people will be processed in future will change. We might not have to take our shoes off or take our laptop out and go through screening. You'll just have a magical arch where you just walk through and you've been deemed through profiling, through other recognition techniques that you're kosher, so you can just move through. So the way to do that in this particular case is to work with very long span systems which allow us to bridge up to 120 meters between individual mega columns. Everything else underneath, the retail pods, the processing pods, can all be ripped out, removed, changed, reorganized over the next 50 years, and I won't even be here anymore. So in ways that we cannot even imagine, but it allows the building to retain its character. Now you have to think, to achieve that, you have to know of a construction system that will allow you to achieve those kind of long span systems. And in China, it is, in fact, you can see here my nasty sketches, S-frame, space frame. It's a large-scale space frame that allows us to do that has been perfected in China, allows us to span these kind of distances on a shell action form-found roof. Also, the other thing that is important, if you will, is how do people interact in this space? And again, how do Chinese people in particular understand retail and shopping? And shopping, as you know, today in an airport accounts for up to 50% of the total income of an airport: shopping, concessions, retail, advertising. So it is almost, cynically speaking, you could take one of the big malls that you have in Hyderabad and stick departure gates on it, and that's what people want today in an airport. They want a big mall with gates, and what happens in the mall can be experiential. You might not be buying things. You might be using it as a big showroom where you can buy things later on online or buy them when you come back. So people want to have choice. People do not want to be shoehorned into those spirally direction-finding, snakes of retail that you get in most airports. They actually want choice. They want to be able to make a decision, and they want to be able to navigate their own path through these different retail pods and decide, what is it that I'm actually trying to do? What is it that interests me? And one of the things we found working at Heathrow, we did a project for Heathrow a couple of years back, was this idea of identity. And the idea that you need to create something that people can relate to, either because it's their hometown or they're visiting, and it gives a spatial quality that takes things, remember the Galaxy project, back to a human scale. Remember, this building is very big. It's 1.5 kilometers wide, tip to tip, this airport. How do you create something that is more sensual, something that is more human in the way you deal with it? And so we started to look at, this is again from Heathrow, but it's the same kind of idea of centralized retail that extends into the piers, where you can actually use technology. When you're moving through a space with a smartphone system, you have a lot of sensory equipment in the airport that is continuously looking at the passengers, looking at the type of shopping they're doing, and can start to suggest what we refer to as a curated retail experience. In other words, the airport is so big, let's say I really like, books, and one of you really likes, shoes, and you won't have time to do everything. So it will steer me to where the books are, it'll steer you to where the shoes are, because it's most likely where you're likely to have what they call a productive retail experience. So this may sound a little cynical, but it really is about how do you provide an experience for everyone that is meaningful to them. And it can be commercial, but it could be cultural. Do you bring a museum in there? Do you bring a gallery in there? Do you bring pop-up food activities to bring new culinary experiences? What can you do with a space where people are mixing and matching all the time? So one of the things that the client was quite intent on doing, which they've done before, is to integrate, for example, also you can see this is one of the open gardens we have in the terminal, integrate a Chinese temple. Because the idea of a temple is such a contrast in design that it becomes almost a separate time zone. You're not literally trying to build a temple-like airport, but you're bringing in a cultural artifact done by artisans that actually reminds people of where they are. So again, this is from a Heathrow sketch, but the idea is vistas. The idea is, how do you find your way intuitively? Most people, when you're working in China, in India, in many other countries, a lot of the passengers probably are traveling for the first time. They've never been to an airport before. It can be so big, so daunting, so scary that they might not know what to do. And if I can see my airplane, I'm more relaxed. Oh, there's my plane. I have time. I've got half an hour. I can go a bit shopping. So that visual experience is important. And helping people find their way. Now, Emma here lives in Milano, so she'll recognize the image on the left, which is the Galleria, which is the idea of guiding people through light to particular destinations, and also the experience of self, of moving through guided light. This is something that our office has used a lot in other museums in Rome. And so we proposed having the same thing in the piers of the building, light guiding you down towards the gates. So you follow the light from a central space of light to the individual directions. You still have signage to tell you where your gate is, but fundamentally using the architecture as something that will guide you to where you need to go. So to conclude, this is just a quick few images of how this thing came together. Very rapidly, we broke ground on Boxing Day in 2014, so the end of 2014. We built the entire project in about 4 years. So we've been spending the last 4 or 5 months doing testing and readiness. We opened the building on the 26th of September. The service began. So actually, I think, and that was domestic service, and international service will start at the end of this month. So if you want to fly to Beijing, or if you have to fly to Beijing, you can then experience this project. It's a very, very large project. This is just showing you the sunken core of the station. This is before you actually build the airport on top of it. We put in something like 6,000 piles into the ground just for the station alone. At one point, we had up to 80 of these mega cranes on site with 40,000 workers working 24-hour shifts to build the project. In the core alone, we moved some 3 million cubic meters of earth. We poured something like 1.5 million cubic meters, 2.5 overall in the entire building, cubic meters of concrete. A project of the superlative, if you will, and also in terms of speed. So you see here now the railway box. You can still tell that big rectangle underneath. You see the concrete coming up. And then this big central dome in the middle, which spans 90 meters across the dome, and over 100 from these 6 mega columns that make the space completely column-free. As I mentioned, done in an understanding of what technology is available that can, in this country, could be different in India, to span large-scale systems. So that human component, here the guys welding together these giant spheres of this giant space frame using laser alignment. It's a very precise technique that's been developed in China. But the size of the space frame means that we can span very, very long distances. And you see here, obviously the construction, in this case we're pouring the grade beams, the level of management that's required on a site like this to get people to do what they need to do. So the human component of working with these people, all the levels of management, is really the main talking point of this project. So here then we assemble the space frames. They're lifted on the strand jacks, as you can see here on the left. Very fast way of putting it together and lifting up the entire core of the building. You can see also the central dome here. And then this is covered with this, relatively conventional, using flexible standing seam technology. We can get this kind of eerie landscape on the roof of these domes, and then the metal covering on top of it. So relatively straightforward production techniques that make heavy use, obviously, of the available manpower, and it's kind of that human effort that is required behind this, that is really necessary to produce a project of this kind of scale. And as I said, really a national project, a labor of love. This is something that I think we will see also when we get round to start working in Mumbai. As you probably know, the Mumbai site is being prepared. The enabling works are underway. And something like this will happen here as well. And it is really a testament to the collective will of a society to build a project of this scale. You can see a little bit of what the space looks like inside now that it's finished. So anyway, the building is basically open. Thank you. Like I said, it's been a labor of love. It takes 8 years to do something like this and go around and inspecting things. And we got involved even in the operations and testing, so they bring in lots of fake bags, and they bring in all the staff and their families and their kids, and all pretend to be passengers with fake boarding passes, and for months test if this thing really works. That makes you really tired, as you can see. And anyway, so we had a big opening ceremony about 10, 12 days ago now, and the next day we had A380 first flight out of the terminal, and things are up and running. So hopefully we'll do that here again as well soon. Thank you very much.